So it's recording now. Welcome everybody to this conversation. We're calling them CP Impact Conversations, where we're going to focus on a body of work that we've done or are doing in common purpose. And Florida has been a point of focus and attention and impact from the beginning. So great to see you all, and know that many others will be interested in this. That's my dog. How many of you can hear my dog?
Yes.
I always wonder. Okay. Stop, dog. Stop, McDuff.
That's okay.
Well, hello, everybody. It's got to be somebody like an Amazon delivery person or something, the way he's still going. But hey, we're glad to have everybody. And it's been such a great body of work that we've been fortunate to do in Florida. And we are not even close to being done. But there are 3 folks on this call or Zoom call who have been key leaders of our work in Florida from the beginning. And I think you all know them, but if you might just raise your hand real quick. Amy Summers and Bert Greenwood and MJ Jimenez. And they are all incredible, and they have deep impact and meaning to me and to the body of work and common purpose. So what I thought I would do is I would open up with a question for each of you, and then MJ and I will kind of host and run some questions here as we go. And in about 20, 25 minutes, we're going to just open it up for questions to go into the chat to talk about, and pieces to that we can more broadly converse around. So this is on Florida, and the body of work here is to kind of get a sense of the 2018 to 2020 trajectory that we have been in, and as we move forward, the work that we have left to go. So much. But Amy, I got to start with you, because I know back from the beginning, you being there on day one as we were putting together our planning, and also your unfinished business with Florida. So now I know not everybody on here probably knows you, so maybe you could give us a quick intro and then just say why have you had such a thing with Florida?
Sure. It's so cool to see everybody here, and I can't wait to hear about some of the more recent work. My background is that I'm originally from Seattle, and at the time I wanted to go to university was when China and the US were opening up relations, and some of you who are here in the late 70s, early 80s probably remember that Seattle was one of the cities Deng Xiaoping visited when he did that big trip to the US that was kind of critical to launching US interest in investing in China. And so I ended up going into the field of China studies and becoming a lawyer focused on China. And I spent many years living overseas. And then I had moved back to the United States in 2015, having worked overseas to try and get Barack Obama elected, and thinking that we had escaped this horrible nightmare of the Bush years and that things were on a good path. And then I found out, of course, that things were not on a good path. They were on a really crazy path. And through a series of coincidences or fate, I got to know Ron Postma and his wife, Kathy Koss, who launched a group of people who had in various ways been engaged in community activism or political activism, and were sort of wanting solace in the wake of the election. And they knew David through his pilgrimage work and started telling him about some of the things we were doing. And David had been thinking about setting up a wider group to leverage his platform through his many years of doing lectures and his visibility in the community, to try and give a channel for people to use their frustrations and sadness to effect good. And through that, I got invited to meet with David and Muget and Ron and a bunch of other folks who were first working on what became Common Purpose. And at that initial meeting, David had already worked with folks to identify the group of states that he saw would first be the ones where Common Purpose would focus. And I forget all of them, but I was pretty open to taking any of them because I just felt like we needed to do something. And I got tagged with Florida, and I was actually really pleased to be tagged with Florida because I've always felt deep resentment over what happened in 2000 with the election.
Yeah.
And as I dug into the research in preparation for our going to work there, my resentment actually only grew because it turned out that, this whole thing about disenfranchising people who have previously been convicted of felonies or are seen as somehow illegitimate voters played a big role in that election. In 1998, there had been an effort to purge people who were seen as illegitimate voters because of an election not going the way that the Republican establishment wanted. And they ended up taking upwards, the estimates vary, but it's considered broadly acceptable to say that about 10,000 voters were preemptively removed because their names were similar to names of people who were on the Department of Law Enforcement's list as having been convicted of a felony. And this wasn't really broadly notified, and people didn't realize that this had happened. And so then when they went to vote in the 2000 election, they weren't allowed to vote. And you'll recall that the band of voting that decided the election in favor of Bush was 537 votes. So it had Florida not the prior cycle done what it had done, then maybe none of the things that we're experiencing today would have happened. Maybe Al Gore would have been the president. Maybe we would have dealt with climate change. Maybe the global economic crisis wouldn't have happened or been so terrible. Maybe we wouldn't have invaded Iraq. So all that to say, I really felt like Florida in many ways is ground zero for the maladies we face today as a society. And also in my research, I learned that the manifestations of the voting system today in the 21st century directly grow out of the post-Civil War Reconstruction era constitution that Florida legislature somewhat cynically adopted in order to be allowed back into the Union. And the prohibition against people ever being allowed to vote once they had been convicted of a felony dated back to that 1868 constitution. So to me, Florida was really, really important. And once we got a chance to start working there and work with Melinda Schmitz, who was our initial point of contact and proved to be such a wonderful partner for us, it really validated for me that the historic concerns I had uncovered were still manifesting in really horrible ways even today. And the good folks who were trying to push back against these trends really needed and welcomed support from outsiders like us. So that's just a little bit about me and how I approached the work that we started. Was it 2 years ago now? It seems so much longer.
Yeah, so in 2018, you were going to go in summer. You couldn't personally go, but we sent it. And then we did go in fall.
Yep.
And then we went back
to do the get out the vote work for Andrew Gillum and for Amendment 4.
Yeah, in the fall. Yeah. Then we went back in February?
No, then we went in June of 2019 for 3 weeks in relays. And then you weren't able to go in the fall of 2019, right? I was working in South Carolina at that point for Kamala.
We went in January, right before all the COVID stuff.
Yeah, and so four times.
So in June of 2019, and Melinda, can you wave to us, everybody? Our awesome, can everybody wave to Melinda Schmitz, our awesome host in Florida? And we love you, Melinda, and it's great to have you on this call. But that relay time period in June, Amy, was a point where we needed multiple leads because we wanted to go register voters before the Republican kind of laws went into place, forcing the repayment of fees and fines. And in that period of time, Bert came on board as one of our team leads at that. And so really the baton was handed, right? And it was, you brought in Dan Roach, and Dan was incredible. So it would have been the three of you, but then Amy gets this job working for somebody, I don't know, what, Senator Kamala Harris, and goes off to South Carolina, and Bert steps in and with Dan, and then MJ comes on board in early 2020. So the baton, this is really like almost the way that we're set up to work, okay? The baton getting passed. So Bert, can you just give a little bit of overview of your getting involved, and then MJ, you're getting involved, and then we'll kind of start to talk about some of the strategic stuff now.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see so many of you. Yay, Florida, Melanda, woo-hoo. So I came on board with Common Purpose in 2018, and many of you might remember we had workshops that we had to attend before we went out. And state leads would go to corners of the room and they would kind of do a pitch. Like I think David said, do a 5-minute pitch on why people want to go to your state. And I heard about a minute and a half of Amy, and I turned to my friend Yvonne, who went to Florida with me the very first time, and we said, we're going to Florida. We're going to Florida. We're going to follow Amy. We're going to do this work. And I didn't know very much about what was going on in Florida. I learned a lot. I did the research. Amy did a great job of preparing us. And then we got there and met the incredible team that Melanda put together. We had some wonderful union partners. And our first experience in Florida, we actually teamed up with a lot of local union folks. And I had the great fortune of being teamed up with a local gentleman from South St. Petersburg named Larry. And Larry stuck with me for 5 days. And it was, would not be an exaggeration to say it was a life-changing moment. Larry and I just talked this morning. I told him we're going to do this call. He was like, great. What? You know, is Miss Yvonne going to be on it? And I said, no, I don't know. You know, she does yoga in the morning. He goes, oh, I remember. So, you know, the work that we do it's meaningful, but it's also personal. And so that's why I keep coming back to Florida. I come back for the purpose and I come back for the people. And one of the really big reasons that Florida has meaning for me is exactly what Amy talked about. It's the idea that within the United States, we disenfranchise folks because of past behavior. And for our family, we actually have a person who had their voting rights reinstated, and it was an easy process. And I thought it was an easy process for everyone. So I didn't have any idea that Florida had these archaic, systemic, and you know, bigoted ways of addressing voting rights. So I went in 2018, went back in 2019. I was lucky enough to be one of the rotating team leads, and then MJ and I just came back with a great team. We went in Florida, early Florida, and as Bobby said, we made it right under the wire. Had we been a couple of weeks later, we probably would not have been able to do the work. Our recent work in Florida just amplified everything that I knew about why we want to be in Florida. We had a team of 45 folks, and we door knocked and got petitions signed, and we did something that was relatively new to me, and that was deep canvassing, which meant we spent a lot of time actually having long conversations with voters, finding out what would impact them the most, what would cause them to want to vote, get active as voters and in their community. So it's just been really great work. And as I think Charles says all the time, you know, we come for the work, we stay for the people. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of this great team. And my partner, MJ.
Hi, everyone. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for being here today. I miss all of you, my team. I'm really happy to be here. So how did I join the Florida team? It was really, you know, I came to Common Purpose. I joined Common Purpose in the fall of 2019. And a couple months later, David calls me and says, hey, MJ, do you want to be a co-lead in Florida? And I had no idea what that even meant. I don't know what I was getting myself into, but he really believed in my leadership at that moment, and he really allowed me to explore my leadership in Florida. And honestly, it couldn't have been better. I loved being part of this team. I got an amazing partner to do it with, and you know, my experience in Florida is something that first I'll never forget, but also something that I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of how communities of color and returning citizens are disenfranchised from our, you know, the from democracy, and how their vote really is told that it doesn't matter. And so that also, with the opportunity that I had to work in a predominantly Latino district, Hillsborough, that was also an amazing experience for me. We'll talk a little bit more about it soon here, but my team is amazing, and I'm really proud of all of you. And I'm able to connect with all of you through our WhatsApp conversations, and every day I'm really inspired to continue this work, because I see how much commitment there is from our community, and that really inspires me and motivates me to continue doing this work. So thank you, Florida team, and let's do it. Let's keep doing this work.
Thank you, MJ.
Let's just give a little clap to Amy, Bert, and MJ, right? Yeah, for your leadership, right? Totally. So, Melinda, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
Yeah. Hey, let's go. Hey, let's go, Melinda. 1, 2, 3. Melinda.
Melinda.
It was so cool listening. I loved, Amy, hearing the history behind and how far back, you were pulling the connection from what happened so long ago to, the impact in the early 2000s to, it all has, our votes have consequences too. And then just watching how much it's changed from the first visit, because Amy and I had conversations planning everything, and then she had the hip surgery and couldn't come. But even you were still a part of it, and you were, you organized everything, and people were trained when they got there. And that was just a small group, our first experience. And to be able to send the people that you did for the Gillen campaign and do the amazing work that you did around, getting Amendment 4 passed with those votes, and really helping people get to the polls. Remember the last GOTV days when it was just over and over again getting those people to go vote. And then it's been really beautiful, because when I reached out to Amy, when I'm like, Jamie Grant he's trying everything he can to circumvent the voter's voice and make Amendment 4 not available to as many of those returning citizens as we had planned. And you guys just so quickly responded, and the 3-week rolling, that was just wild. And I think we were close to 500 voters were registered during that time frame, and I think only 10 of them were Republicans. So a lot of Democrats and NPAs were registered, which was amazing. And then this last time, we went into 3 completely different areas. So every time you've come, we've done something different. And we've tried to learn from previous experiences. And it was really great that y'all were able to not only register voters, but have those listening conversations, because those conversations are going to have an impact on the upcoming election. And even with all the remote organizing that we're going to have to do during this time frame that we're in now because of COVID and the uncertainty, we can still have those listening conversations on the phone. So the skill sets that were being used during that, we'll continue to use those. And I can't express how much respect I have for everyone that's come, and you are just such an example for volunteers in the state here and on the ground that live here, because they know about anybody that's met you, or just like, wow, they mean business. They come here to work. They come here to make a difference, and they do. So I applaud you all for the work that you're doing, and the way that you approach it is just amazing. Everybody on the call and everybody that's been, thank you so much.
Well, Melinda, none of our ability to support and contribute happens without you, like literally you. All right. So we are honored to do this work with you. Just because there's going to be people that will watch this call, and there might be some of you, I just want to quick sketch out some of the trajectory of our work. So in 2018, Amy led the team there, and we had 2 visits there, one to register voters and then one to get out the vote. I had the honor to be part of the Get Out the Vote group that was there in the last week of the campaign in 2018 to try to pass Amendment 4, to try to elect Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson. Broke my heart, the 2 of them, not getting elected, especially Gillum. Not only personally because I was impressed and inspired by him, but also because as governor, he could have vetoed the laws that have been passed to kind of restrict Amendment 4. But we did get Amendment 4 passed, had to get more than 60% of the vote because it was a statewide initiative, and it did. It happened, and that on its face was supposed to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated people. In early 2019, the Republican legislature passed, and then the Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, signed over a couple months a law put forward, as I understand it, by Jamie Grant, the legislator there, to force people formerly incarcerated to pay all of their legal fees as well as restitution before they could actually regain the right to vote, and also made it extremely complicated for how it was going to be done. So it was not only the payments, it was just the Byzantine kind of process of making it get done. We went there in 2019 to try to register some of those folks, and we did in June of 2019 before those laws went into place. I don't know what happened, so this is going to be a question that I'd love one of the leadership to answer in a second here. What the space is for those almost 500 people that we registered in June, like where do they exist in the fabric of Florida? But then the laws were passed, put into place July 1st to restrict voting rights for formerly incarcerated, to make it harder to have to pay the fees and go through this really complicated process. We went back in February to try to register some of those voters, despite those complications. And then in the last month, there's been a federal court decision which has struck down the state's approach to bracketing those formerly incarcerated returning citizens. And the court ruling says that those laws violate parts of the U.S. Constitution. It appears that court decision is going to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, but how exactly that's going to unfold is not clear to me. So I think 2 updates that I'd love to start with would be where do those 500 people that we registered in June exist in the system right now? And then second, what is the kind of status of the ability to, regardless of COVID, to register voters right now in the state? Okay, so I'm not sure if Bert or Melinda or Amy or MJ has the answer to that question, but I'd like to get that clarified, those 2 pieces, just before we go farther.
David, one quick other clarification. You should ask Melinda who did that wonderful picture behind her.
Okay, sure. So, Melinda, do you have a clarification on those 3 questions? I know you do on one of them. Do you have a clarification on 3 of those or not?
Well, as far as it goes to returning citizens, one of the problems that they had with what they were trying to enact was that the accounting system in the state is so, they didn't even have a good way to tell who owed what money. So therefore, how can you tell them that they can't register to vote if you don't even know how much money they owe? Or, so that whole part of the system just throws such a wrench into it that it makes it hard to even figure that out. But each county also has its own way of doing things. So depending on the system in the county, there are counties where a judge can say, okay, we'll waive these fees or turn them over to some kind of public service so that they can work off whatever fees that they have. And I think FRRC also had, we're trying to do some type of volunteer service, which could, the last time I talked to them, they were trying to get it to where one of the things that they could do for service would be to help register voters, which is, would be awesome. So with this new Hinkle's ruling, I'm not sure how that is impacting everything. I know that we're, even with COVID, because we can't be in person, we're trying to get people to register online. But registering online is even harder for underserved communities because you have to have a valid driver's license or an ID, and that costs $25. And a lot of times people move, and if you have to do it every time you move, that adds up. And if money's the problem, that's like a barrier. So that's I don't have a good answer for what we're doing as far as paper, because we are not doing paper right now. But the Democratic Party is planning on trying to start doing paper voter registration in July, the 1st of July, is what I recently heard, hoping that the recent protests are not going to send a major spike, but we've actually been having somewhat of a spike post Memorial Day weekend because everyone was out in the sunshine. So Amy, I don't know if you've done any research that has any more answers than what I have, because that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think as to those people who were able to register during that window that David's referencing before the Senate Bill 7066 went into effect on July 1, as Melinda says, I think it really is dependent on a county by county approach. And in Pinellas County, where we were working last year, my recollection was that the state attorney for the county had said he wasn't going to go after finding out what the deal was with these people. And I met at least one gentleman who had already received, he had filed to register right away when when Amendment 4 passed or went into effect in January, and he had already received his voter registration card. So that said to me that if you were registering in that window, you weren't caught up in this 85,000 person list that Judge Hinkle references in his decision, where if you were applying afterwards, they were cross-reference, the Board of Elections in that county was cross-referencing with the Bureau of Law Enforcement to see what the status was of your situation. So my guess is those people we registered last year did successfully get their registration cards. But you haven't seen, Melinda, statistics for Pinellas County showing an uptick in registrations in that time frame that would correlate with the almost 500 people we registered?
We do actually have a pretty good, let me look for a minute here. I know our numbers are up definitely on Democrats and NPAs, because a lot of, if you remember from those looking at the forms, there were a lot of people who didn't check boxes or put no party affiliation. And that happens, I hear a lot of times from people in underserved communities. They're afraid that someone's going to mess with their vote. So instead of checking a D, they do the no party. So, that's another reason why we find it really important to make sure that we are talking to no party affiliation voters and not just sticking with the D box. So, but let me get a number while we're on this.
David, while Melinda looks for numbers, I can share that Tuesday, just of this last week, Hillsborough County, which was one of the areas that we went in February, Hillsborough County, the state attorney in the 13th district, they had their very first voting rights docket. And at their voting rights docket, folks who wanted their voting rights restored were able to go in front of a judge. They were able to do one of two things: either say that they had the inability to pay whatever LFOs, legal financial obligations that they thought they had, or they had contacted, to Amy's point, their district secretary of election and asked, well, how much do I owe? And the answer was, we don't know. So they went forward in Hillsbury on Tuesday of this week in front of a judge, and the judge restored their right to vote on the spot. And the district attorney was so excited, they actually videotaped it, and they talked to some of the voters. They talked about why it was so important and what it meant to them. And it was really moving because, like many of you, David and I listened almost on a daily basis to the court proceedings as SB 7066 moved through the trial. And it was just pretty astounding. There's 67 districts in the state of Florida, and there's 67 different processes on how returning citizens might have an opportunity to have their votes restored. And so during the process of the trial, it just, every day there was just something more egregious. There was just something more, David and I are listening and we're texting each other in real time going, did they just say that? What did they just say? What is that? What? And so what we discovered as the different election officials gave testimony was that the state of Florida as a whole had no system by which they could account how much money was owed. The closing arguments that the ACLU attorney made went something along this line. It would be likened to you going to your credit card company who just put your credit card into a collection agency and ask them, how much do I owe? What do I need to pay you? And they would say, I don't know. We don't know how much. Why don't you look through all your receipts and get back to us and pay that amount? So that's what the voters were up against. And, right now, according to what's going on just in that one county, Hillsborough, we've got a voting rights docket now that's allowing folks to have their rights restored.
That's amazing, partner. Thank you for sharing that. I have a question for you, or for anyone really. Well, from Amanda or Amy, what do you remember from your experiences in Florida, knocking on doors, and when you had the opportunity to bump into someone who well, I personally remember, who didn't know that they even had the right now to vote. What was your experience? What were the sentiments that you were hearing, or what were the thoughts of people that you were there to register to vote and they didn't even know they could vote? What was that experience like?
Well, I would say that my experiences reinforce this idea that people in a group are not a monolith. So I had a range of experience. Some people were ecstatic. I mean, I remember meeting this one woman, first thing in the morning, and she had been coming back from a night shift of work, and she was almost dancing with glee at the fact that I was right on her front step and could register instead of her trying to find time to go down to wherever she had to do it in person. But then I met another man who had spent most of his adult life in and out of jail, and had finally been released and was living in a homeless shelter and doing yard work. I had actually knocked on the door of the house to see if they knew of anyone, and the owners weren't there, but he was doing work in the yard, and I started talking to him, and then he explained, well, I actually am somebody who could register. And he was so traumatized by what he had endured, and said to, like the last time he had gone to jail, he said the prosecutors had tried to, they knew somebody else had actually done the thing that was the subject of the case. And they used him as leverage to try and get him to flip on these other people. And he wouldn't do it. So then they sent him to jail. And he said, of course, with the record I had, nobody was going to believe me when I said I didn't do it. So he agreed to have his picture taken, but when you look in his eyes, there's like this veil over them. It was so, so sad. He was a very nice man. And then there was another woman, when I knocked on her front door, she's like, oh, no, nobody who lives here. And then I pressed a little bit. And she goes, well, actually, my boyfriend's here and he's taking a shower and he got out of jail. I was like, oh, well, do you think he'd want to register? And she goes, I don't know, but I'm going to go get him out of the shower and make sure he registers. And I could hear him in the background, like, oh, I don't want to do that now. And she's like, you are going to do that. And then she made him come out into the stoop and register him. So, there was just a range of reactions, but they were all very heartfelt. Whatever the reaction was, there was a real thread of intense, real emotion there.
Thank you for sharing that, Amy.
I was by walking, I don't remember exactly which section, and there was construction going on, and I approached the supervisor, was the only one kind of standing there, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, oh, well, I know a lot of these guys have had their voting rights taken away because of imprisonment, and so he had them all stop working and called them over so that I could register them. So it was really, it was wonderful.
Of course, we have the famous case And Amy was in the car with us where the guy was so excited that he forgot to put his clothes on.
David, do you have a question for Amy or?
I think I have a question for Bob after that one, but no, I'm going to let that go. Okay. Other people on the call right now, well, I want to do a couple things. One is I want to eventually pivot us to what we're doing now and how we're moving forward. But if you have a quick story or just feeling or comment that you would be willing to share with the group, just as a point of like community here. Can't do it with too long with this many folks, but just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll just call on you and have you go ahead and do that. So go ahead, Bob, start us off. But it's gonna be quick. Yep. And then I'll go to
it was during the time when it was get out the vote. We were canvassing in a center block apartment situation, and I came across this woman who was sitting on the stoop, who was part of who we were needed to canvass, and I asked her if she was going to vote, and her comment will stay with me forever. She said she was not going to vote because nothing had changed, and she then relayed the fact that how when Obama was president, there was no bad health care, bad schools, and they shot our kids, right? And then, well, actually, she said that with Bush, and then she said that when Obama came in, it was the same comment for both when a Republican won there and when a Democrat won there. So we got to do more than get people to vote is the point of this thing. We've got to get people understanding and starting to have trust again in the system that we're going to improve their schools, we're going to improve their health care, and we're not going to shoot their kids.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Peggy, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
I did. I wasn't in Florida, but I've been inspired by what I heard, as I was by Stacey Abrams' article. Many of you probably read in the New York Times a couple days ago. And then I've been carrying around, if you can see it, a little card that the Democratic headquarters of the desert in California passes out. I'd gone to a talk that Chris Pelosi, one of Nancy's daughters, gave, but this has this can just be scanned by a phone or other, and it takes you directly into the site to register in the state of California. And I wondered if you know of that kind of thing being used elsewhere in the country.
That is definitely emerging as a piece. It's an action that is being adopted by some organizations. It's not something that we are doing yet, but I'm expecting that our partner orgs will come up with all kinds of innovative pieces like that we will use. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure. Over here. Sure. Janie or Janie?
Janie.
Janie.
Hi. So I live on Vashon Island in Washington State, and I'm part of Vashon Maury Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice. Looking forward to hearing about next steps that we can take to be part of empowering former felons to vote. Just two quick things. I worked on Hillary's campaign in Florida in 2016 in Hallandale Beach, and it was one of the most discouraging things I've ever done, and I've traveled for quite a few elections. I swore I would never go back to Florida, having spent quite a bit of time there growing up. But I care deeply about this issue. Criminal justice is a big piece of the work that we do in Surge. So I am in. The other thing I wanted to say is in 2018, I worked on Beto's campaign for governor in Texas. And one day I had a conversation with a man encouraging him to vote. And he said he couldn't because he was a former felon. Former felons in Texas could vote, but he didn't know that because no one had bothered to tell him. And in fact, in the Black community, which is where I spent all of my time, no one had ever knocked on their doors before to encourage them to vote. So that's the piece I care deeply about. And I think that empowering people to vote legally is obviously the critical first step. And then we need to really figure out how we let people know, because I think most in many states, even including our own, people don't want folks to know what their rights are. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Janie. One of the very best things that I've come out of Florida with is the importance of conceiving of these folks as like returning citizens, right? To think of them as whole human beings, and they don't see themselves that way because the system treats them so horribly. So it is the least we can do, right? The least we can do to see the wholeness of these humans. All right, who else has got a comment?
If you want some numbers, I can give you some numbers real quick just to look at.
Oh, we love numbers. We love numbers.
Yeah. So you were here in June, and it was that 3 weeks rolling, and you were basically in one specific congressional district, which is 13. So all the way from, you were registering voters in Clearwater. I don't know if you remember some of those places. We were sending you all over, and then down in St. Petersburg. So we had a pretty broad area, and it was all in congressional district 13. So from June when you were here, in July, we registered 843 voter registrations were Democrats were added to the rolls, and then another 736 NPAs. And then following that month, which was, so July is when the ruling was supposed to start taking effect. So with those numbers, I mean, that's well above what we registered when you were here. So I'm hoping that most of the people that we registered were in that number, unless they had something wrong with the form that had to get followed up on. But on the bright side from that, the following month, there was still another 670 Democrats added and another 742 NPAs. So it's not like the number just fell off the following month. So if it did take someone a little while to get through all the process, there were more people registered there. So our numbers have definitely been on the rise, because there were people that we could register. They changed the voter registration form. I don't know if anybody remembered seeing that, but they tried to add some different language on the top that made it, and the ACLU filed a lawsuit against that form, and several other groups. So we continued and are still using the original form. So anyway, that's just an update on that. And from the personal story part, as far as registering returning citizens, I love the moment when I go to the door and someone didn't know, and I'm there to help them. And you know, it's like, I've never voted. I didn't think I could ever vote. And I went to one house where the grandparents had both passed away, and it was the grandson and his girlfriend then had just become his wife, and both of them were returning citizens from things that happened to them when they were much younger as kids. And you know, they'd served their time, and so I registered both of them on the same day. And that's like, to me, you know, it's like starting off a family, you know, a husband and wife, young in life, that have had their rights restored and were registered to vote. So I commend you all for doing the work and doing it so passionately everywhere that you're going to help people. And it's, yeah, really crazy here in Florida. So thank you.
Sure.
David, Sarah has the story for us.
Yep,
too.
we're going to go with Sarah and then you, MJ, okay? Because I want to hear your thoughts. And then we're going to do the update with Bert and Melinda, like where we're going forward. Sure, Sarah, please.
Yeah, at least 2 of those registrations in June were for me. And I remember walking down a street, there were 2 ladies hanging out under a tree just chatting, and I kind of told them what we were doing, went on down the block, came back, and they reached out to me and said, you know, I could do that. I could register to vote. And they didn't say they were returning citizens, but or one of them, at least one of them was. And it was just so nice that they reached out to me.
That's amazing. Thank you all for sharing. I think, as David mentioned, our stories are so important because not only does it tie the work together, it makes it feel valuable, but it also tells the world, right, the people that surround us, that this work is important, and if they'd like to, they can totally join us to make this a better democracy for all of us. So thank you all for sharing. My experience was actually really amazing. I also had the privilege of meeting a lot of these returning citizens. One person actually, so Bert and I, we teamed up. We teamed up for canvassing, and we knocked on a door where this man came out, and we were actually searching for his grandson, I believe, and he wasn't there. And so we asked him, would you like to register to vote? Are you registered to vote? And he came out with this really kind of sad comment saying that he hadn't been a good boy, so he can't vote. And that almost brought me tears to my eyes, right? I felt so bad that he thought that because he had been a bad boy before, he didn't have the right to vote or to place his opinions and the right to voice what he feels, right? And I remember his face when Bert and I told him that actually he could. We definitely explained the whole fee thing and mentioned that to him, but his eyes lit up, and it was a moment that I'll never forget. And being able to give him the resources and the information that where he could go vote and like how to register. And we weren't able to register him at that moment, but we definitely gave him the registration form and asked him to check whether or not he had fees on the website that we gave him. And it was an incredible moment for me as a first-time canvasser in Florida, and also just a first-time canvasser doing this work, this very specific work of supporting and giving resources to our returning citizens. And just a little bit more, I want to share just a little bit more about my experience in Florida. I actually had the amazing experience of being able to communicate in my native language to Latinx folks in Florida, in that very specific county, Hillsborough, which is predominantly POC, predominantly Latinx. And it was from that experience that I come back and I start realizing how important it is to outreach to my Latinx community across the country. And it has really been a pleasure and a really cool experience to gather people around me to do the work to say, hey, your voice matters. I'm personally not able to vote, but the people who I've been able to connect with in these past few months and in Florida, and that I've been able to say, hey, your vote matters. And because I know that this administration has told you that your vote doesn't matter, that your voice does not matter, and that you don't matter, but you matter to me. So that has been amazing for me.
Thanks, MJ.
I have one thing somebody's asking about returning citizens. And so I'll just share something that's really important in the community. When it comes to returning citizens, just imagine if you're knocking on a door and you say, there's a returning citizen living here. I want to talk to them. We don't do that. We don't pinpoint or target returning citizens. So as far as being able to get them out for GOTV, there's no approach that has that in mind. What we do, however, is go to communities that are underserved, where there is a higher number, where they're disproportionately impacted by things like incarceration. From even here, the juvenile justice system, kids can be put in the pipeline, the prison pipeline, at such a young age. So when you were all here in June and again in February, we were leaving. At every door, we left information about your right to vote has been restored. Remember those? They were everywhere. So we blanketed these communities, underserved communities, with that information. So in case they haven't heard about it, which is amazing how many people we encountered that hadn't heard about it, at least we were sharing that. And I don't know if you remember, but I was getting calls from counties where people in Pinellas that we had left door hangers with or information with, had a cousin over across the way in another county, 2 or 3 counties over, and they're like asking questions, what do we do? So just being able to get the word out like we were in such a massive effort to just put door hangers and information everywhere was a really great service to get the word out, as well as help them register to vote. So you did a lot of good things in addition to just registering those voters while you were here. So thanks.
Sure. And a couple things and then we're going to talk about the 13th legislative district, or whichever one you're working in right now, the 13th CD and the legislative district. So statewide, as I understand it, there is not a coordinated kind of campaign to inform people formerly incarcerated that they can register to vote. That the FRRC, the Florida Rights and Restoration Coalition, is running the most sophisticated information campaign out there, but it is not like they're running this massive billboards or blanketing the airwaves with advertisements, right? So the only way that people are being told about this, about the ability to regain their voting rights, which has been in deep limbo till this court decision. The only way that people are even hearing about it is whether we go door to door, and we do not ask them at the door, are you a returning citizen? We just register people to vote in places where there's more of those. Is what I just said correct, Melinda?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, so
Yep.
It's kind of stunning to us in Seattle, I know, to think that why in the hell is there not a $50 million campaign in Florida to return people to voting rights position? Why would there not be? Why would not somebody like the Gates Foundation come in on the voting side and put something like that in place? Well, that's a much deeper societal and political and cultural question, but it doesn't exist there in Florida. So the way it's getting done is by organizations that have been doing this work in underrepresented, traditionally overrepresented in the incarceration system people. Do we select particular communities where we might hit more of those folks that are also key political districts statewide? The answer to that is yes. Correct, Melinda?
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's our entire common purpose motto, is we find the places where we can have the deepest impact possible. So as I understand it, the Hillsborough area, Tampa, Clearwater, all of the I-4 corridor is pretty much like where the action is in terms of the swing districts in the state.
Another part of that is that, remember, after Maria, there were so many people that moved from Puerto Rico to right along the I-4 corridor, because we've actually had an influx from South Florida, people moving north. And I've still, while your team was here in February, in an area that you would not even think would be on the radar, we registered an 80-year-old woman who had moved in with her son, and she had not registered. So she had been here in the States since the hurricane, from Puerto Rico, and now she's registered. And I think we actually got her registered to vote by mail, which is really important. So yeah, we're finding them. We just have to get out there and do the door knocking when it's safe, and do the phone calls and texting and all the other ways we're also writing letters. We have found some, we have a little innovative stuff put together by actually a group in the Hillsborough County Democratic Party, where they took data from property appraisers' websites. They culled a lot of data together, and they looked for addresses where there's no one registered to vote. And so we're going, that's in like an opposite direction to go to it from. So we're looking at areas where we have a higher number of people that we think we need to get registered. And then we're looking specifically for those open places and sending letters and postcards and things like that right now. I mean, we're in the process of putting that together right now. So they've actually been doing it in District 70 down in St. Petersburg. And the office has gotten some phone calls from people that, thank you for sending a card. I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. And they're registered now. So we're getting scrappy. We're trying everything we can think of.
So Bart, can you go ahead and tell us exactly like all the CP kind of levers that where we're at on the CP side of this?
Sure. I'm reading through all the questions. There are a lot of good questions about, do we have phone lists, and are we going to do text banking, and are there swing districts? So let me start with where we are right now. And where we are right now is we have a directed effort to support a candidate in a very important district in Florida. Common Purpose is supporting Jessica Harrington, who is running for a House seat in the 64th district. The reason that's important to us is she would, if successful, she would kick Jamie Grant out of the Florida Tallahassee state office. And so to effectively remove the GOP architect of the bills that came up against Amendment 4, it has a, it hits us at our core. And so we have just completed a phone banking effort for her, and we have some things that'll be announced today, I believe, Melinda, that will be announced as we go forward. We have a postcard opportunity to support her. And MJ can tell you a little bit about some work that she's doing for Spanish-speaking voters in Florida that we hope to reach out to. And Magdalena is the right-hand woman that's helping MJ in some important areas. So we've got that direct, specific district that we're working in. Across the state, we're working with the FRRC to see if there are counties that we can support their local efforts. And right now, I have a call set up either Monday or Tuesday of this coming week, with an organizer in Broward County. And we're looking for another call to be set up later in the week with an organizer in the Miami-Dade area. I don't know what that will look like. When I was researching and looking at what they're doing phone banking. They are doing as much as they can within the COVID world, but of course, everything is very limited. So what our goal would be that we would have opportunities to phone bank, we would have opportunities to letter write, and we would have opportunities to postcard. Basically do whatever our local partners ask us to do in a remote fashion. Will we travel? We have 3 weeks already on the books at Common Purpose. You can go to our event calendar, our field work calendar, excuse me, and you can see that we have blocked out the last 2 weeks of September into the first week of October. Will we travel? We don't know yet, but we are certainly prepared to do that if it's safe and if it works for us and for our local partners. And that would be a push for registering voters. I believe, Melinda, am I right? October 17th or 19th is the cutoff for registration. Is that right?
It might be the 9th.
The 9th?
The other, one of the things too that we were talking about with September is there's a cutoff for vote by mail as well. So we'll be able to do a 2-pronged vote by mail, voter registration combination. I'm multitasking with a finance thing, but let me look at the date. I'll get the date for you.
So we've got those plans in the work. The thing that I'm really excited about is the opportunity to forge some new partnerships within the FRRC organization. And as David said, they're not sort of this, big monolithic organization that moves across the state. It's county by county. And what we found is Common Purpose builds good partnerships when they're intimate and when we get to know folks and when we come in and we do the work they ask us to do. So that's what we've got planned right now. And those are specific to Common Purpose. For folks who are interested in doing sort of more general plans to get out the vote or encourage voter registration in Florida, there are several national events and efforts that you can take part of. Postcard to Voter is running, it's now going into its 3rd month. Just about every week, they open up another county that they ask folks to write postcards to. Vote Forward, doing the same thing. You can actually go in and pick which district you want to write a letter to. So there are lots of things that you can do on your own as far as advocacy. As far as Common Purpose, we're looking to establish relationships so that we can continue to go back and do the work.
Great. Thank you, partner.
You're welcome, partner.
You also mentioned the work that we're going to be doing for Jessica in Spanish. I'm really excited about that. We have a couple, I believe, 1,000 people we're going to be connecting with, right, Melinda, in Spanish?
Believe it or not, we actually have 15,000 Spanish-speaking voters in District 64.
So,
yeah.
So I'm really excited to roll that out soon. I also want to share that I have incredible support, and I'm really proud of my support system in this work. Of course, my partner, Melinda and Magdalena, who has been incredible in supporting me with this Spanish work. She's going to be supporting us by translating Jessica's website, some of the resources. I want to make sure that when we make these calls, we're not sending Spanish speakers to a website that they can't understand. So I want to make sure that when they get there, they see their language represented and that they're able to actually understand and use these resources that we're giving them or supporting them with.
The Spanish language, Spanish language work is you are doing some of that now in Arizona.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Right. And we will certainly move that into Florida under whatever technologies we can do. Right now, Melinda, is there anything firmly set up for outreach to those particular voters?
We've already got, Magdalena has been so amazing. She's already translated our script. So we've got a phone bank set up. We are reaching out to Democrats and NPAs first. So we're going to be doing rolling waves of who we talk to. But it came up on our call when I was talking to MJ about sending them to the resource page. We've got a COVID resource page. Magdalena has already translated that. So those two things are ready to go. But on the website, the June 15th is my deadline for having everything redone on the website. So we want to be able to launch it so they'll be able to click the button and have the Spanish translated site. So once we start making those calls, they can go to her website and look at everything in Spanish. So we're actually going to be doing printed material in Spanish. And we also talked about maybe doing some letter writing. So it would be like a handwritten, very personal letter to some of the voters that we want to reach out to, maybe some of those persuadables. And again, having the website in Spanish is something that absolutely would not be happening without your help, certainly this quickly. And Jamie Grant has proven that he really does not reach out to those voters in the community. So that's going to really have a major impact in this upcoming election. We're just super, super excited about the partnership. And it was amazing in February, just being able to have, I don't think anyone at any of the doors we talked to had anyone visit them before. I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think that there was anybody that had any outreach. So that was super powerful to the community to let them know that we care about them and their voice counts and we value it.
Thank you, Melinda.
So Bert and MJ and Melinda, so June 15th, it sounds like we would be able to begin phone calling to Spanish-speaking voters in the area that we're working in. Is that correct? Thumbs up, is that correct? Okay. Do we have another kind of phone banking that we're doing right now to the voters in that area?
Yes, we're actually, we've been doing a phone bank challenge, which has been kind of fun.
Oh,
so
yeah.
5 o'clock today, we're going to be announcing some of that, and it's just really exciting, the impact that Common Purpose has had. And it's really been fun to watch the numbers come in because we've been sending out weekly updates. So we've had some other volunteers, local volunteers, getting on, trying to, jockey for that bragging rights. We'll announce all that at 5 this evening. And we've been having really great response. We've been calling Democrats and checking in on them. If they're doing okay, they're upset about how things are happening and they want to have to actually do something. We're talking to them about volunteering, and so we're signing people up to volunteer. But the numbers, we have a website tracker, and you can see that our numbers have been on the rise since we've been actually reaching out and calling voters, leaving voicemail messages with the phone number, with the website on it. Jessica's even gotten people to call her and tell her that, I went to your website because one of your volunteers called and I'm going to vote for you. My grandchildren are going to vote for you. All our family's going to vote for you. So, it really, there are just so many pieces to the big puzzle that you're having an impact on. And it does make a difference. It's working.
So Melinda, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
That program is over today, right? Will there be another one?
Yeah, it's ongoing. That was just our kickoff to get things started. So we're gonna, yeah.
So we can continue our calls this afternoon, tomorrow, the next day, the next day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there was just in that first wave, there were 6,000 calls in that first one. And then we have 70,000 voters. There are 121,000 voters in the district. But it's really split 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We will not be reaching out to hardcore Republicans. So they'll fall off the list. But we do have about 70,000 voters that we need to talk to in the district. So yeah, lots of work to do. Thanks.
So Bert, the outreach, we're going to wind this down here. The outreach that you're doing to some other potential partner orgs in the state, combined with what Melinda has just articulated and the work that we're already doing with the calls to English speakers, plus the upcoming work to Spanish speakers, that's the pie of the Florida work right now, right? The pie is English calls, Spanish calls through the districts that we're working in with Melinda, plus some potential other partner connections that are you're getting traction on, but haven't been put into place yet. Is that right?
That's right. I have a one-on-one call with Lakeisha out of Broward County, either Monday or Tuesday of this week. And we're going to look to see how we can support the efforts that they're doing there. And they've got a couple of efforts going on around phone banking and letter writing. So once we get that, we'll bring that to you, David, and we'll see, where we go with that. Bring it to Daniel Caseberg and his team around advocacy, and then they'll take a run with it. And there have been a couple of questions about, who our local partners are and how do we get access to mailing lists. So Common Purpose doesn't have mailing lists. There's no way for us to give you access to mailing lists. We do the work that our local partners supply us with. And currently right now, we don't have mailing lists because we have not established those partnerships. As far as doing work with other organizations, Postcard to Voters, go to postcardtovoters.org and they'll set you up with how you can write postcards with them. They have not done a targeted program for returning citizens. That was a question on here. As far as us being able to facilitate you getting numbers for phone banks, the way that phone banks work is, you can go to a website that's called Forward Florida Action. It actually was started by Andrew Gillum. And if you're interested in joining any kind of a phone bank across Florida for progressive or Democratic candidates or issues, you can go on there, you can plug yourself in, send an email, and you can join a phone bank. Most of them have some training that's associated with it. But again, it would be an individual effort on your part. So David, yeah, that's our pie right now. Our pie is how can we remotely be boots on the ground for our partners in Florida? So we've got kind of this three-prong approach, right? We've got phone banking, we've got letter writing, postcarding, and we've got our wonderful Spanish speaking contingency.
Yeah. Okay. Really great to see these updates. And Melinda, the work that you're doing to get us in position to do more work. Magdalena, the work that you're doing to translate that and do the scripts. That is so much the core of what Common Purpose is that kind of support. So 100%. I want to say three things to close, or four. First of all, I want to say thanks to everybody in the work that we're all doing for this democracy, this world, for just everything. Second, Donald Trump won Florida by 112,000 votes. Okay. In the returning citizens, the numbers vary, but they're somewhere between several 100,000 and 1.4 to 1.5 or 6 million potentially registrable returning citizens. Many of those are going to vote Democratic if they get the chance to vote. So we are within striking distance, just in those numbers alone, of flipping things. Okay, so if you're really focused on that alone, that can be a difference maker right there on these numbers. Third, whatever you think of any of the Democratic presidential candidates that have run for the presidency, of the ones that were in the final tier, there's no question that Joe Biden has the strongest likelihood to win the state of Florida of that group. All right. Biden has a history there, strong support, has enormous support among the Democratic leadership in the state. And also, as an older white man with a history, resonates with older white voters. All right. So he has a great chance to win that state at the presidential level. And damn it, Amy, we're going to win Florida this time. All right. We are going to win it. And we are going to drink a lot on election night when Florida comes in early on. All right. We're going to get this done. And then fourth, I don't know what the possibility is to beat Jamie Grant. I don't know. You never know. But I know that morally, it's the right thing to compete in that district. All right. So we make strategic choices, but we inform our strategic choices with ethical considerations in common purpose. And so we have selected an area of the state that is a point of considerable swing state-ish components, I-4 corridor. Second, it's an area that ethically is a home run. We want to beat Jamie Grant. Third, it's where our incredible partner Melinda is. And so we'll run through the wall in support of her. All right. So in all of these dimensions, you know, we're at a bullseye for the way that we do our work. Fourth, last, I think we're going to travel. I think we're going to be traveling in the next couple months, folks. And everybody will make an individual choice about that. But I want everybody to start to shift the mindset that we, out of the 20 states that we have a focus, that we're going to be going to some of them for sure. All right. That is likely going to happen. And the reality is that everybody will make their individual choices, and Florida might be one of the tougher states to go to, depending upon what happens with COVID. And no one will ever go in a place that isn't a place that they're comfortable or safe or done under the right health protocols. But I believe that on the ground organizations in all of these states that we're focusing on are going to come up with creative ways to canvas. They're going to come up with creative ways to canvas because they will want to do that. They will come up with it. They will figure out the health apparatus to make this possible. That is part of what comes with the urgency of the moment. So I think that the reality is that we are going to be doing some traveling in the near future. And so just mentally be there and start to think about whether that's something you want to be part of. We are so now geared to do this work remotely. So we don't need to travel for folks. We can do a ton of work remotely. But if you've got it in your psychological DNA that you're like, my God, I need to go. I want to do this. I will take that risk. Then I want you to know that in common purpose, we're going to make it happen if it's all safe at all. If it's at all safe. Okay. So, and Florida is, it's at the heartbeat of where we are and where we've been and the people that we're trying to register to vote. So thank you all so much, MJ and Bert and Amy, for leading this work, Melinda for hosting and driving us forward there. We want to see those SEIU colleagues if at all possible, to Larry and Christine and others that I remember working with, right? Because we want them to know that we're coming back too. We're coming back remotely or on the ground. All right. So thank you all so much. And for everybody who might be watching this on recording, thank you all. And we got 5 months to go, 149 days till Election Day. All right. So Melinda never sleeps. I know that. And it's the least we can do to meet you there. So thank you, everybody.
Thank
We'll see
you,
later.
team.
Thanks, David.
Florida.
I was going to comment, but you're going to comment.